Hello, Michelle. How are you?
Hello, Aubrey. I'm good. I'm excited to be recording with you today.
Yes, so fun. Lindsay is out of town. She's on a very exciting trip in Europe, but she will be back next week.
Yes, yes.
And this is really fun. Michelle, do you make coffee with fresh grounds?
Oh, I wish I could say I was that fancy, but I don't. Do
I
you?
can't either. No, but for me, it's more not wanting the mess. Like,
Ah,
oh, this the mess of wet coffee grounds. No, thank you.
yeah. Yeah. I get it. I get it. I
But it is
definitely
more
don't.
delicious when I go to a place and I
I
get coffee and they're using a French press and fresh
Yeah,
grounds. It
yeah.
is much more tasty.
Definitely. I do agree. You can tell the difference. So maybe one day I'll get more into it.
Yeah.
So Aubrey, today we are going to be answering a really good listener question, and this is from a listener asked us this question on YouTube. So this is from Story Bits in Russian.
Yeah. You want me to read the question? All
Sure.
right, let's do it. They said, "Thanks for the episode. I was just thinking about coffee, and this episode came to mind again." It's probably the episode where you and Lindsay talked about connecting over how you take your coffee.
Yep.
Amazing connection. And then they said, "It also got me thinking about the words grind, ground, and grinded. These
Hmm.
terms can be really tricky, especially since AI overviews say ground is the standard past tense, while
Mm.
grinded shows up more in informal American English.
Ooh.
I would love to
Mhm.
hear your take on this and maybe see a few examples of grind in different contexts. Warm greetings from Spain." Thank you for this awesome question.
Good question. Very good question. Yeah, Aubrey, this is a little bit tricky, but we're gonna get down to it. So let's start with the first one we're gonna get to today, which is grind and ground. So tell us about this one, Aubrey.
Yeah, so it is tricky because there are a few meanings of the word grind. And
Yeah.
I have heard this mistake. It's pretty generally accepted to hear grinded as the past tense in the States. But
Mhm.
what's tricky is it's used for some of the meanings, but not all of them. So, this first
Mm.
one that we were talking about at the top of the episode, to grind something down, to reduce it to small particles or powder by crushing, this is what we
Mhm.
do with coffee beans, right? We grind them.
Mhm.
And so we might say, I'm going to grind up some coffee beans for fresh roasted coffee, or I'm going to grind up some fresh rosemary, maybe with a
Mm.
mortar and pestle. Do you ever grind up fresh herbs?
No.
I don't either. I know a lot of people do. Real chefs do. A lot of you listeners out there probably do. I'm sure it's more delicious, fresh herbs.
I love how everything you ask me that would make me kind of this, very classy, refined person. I'm like, nope, I don't do
No.
it. In the other episode where today I think I said, no, I don't go to a spa. I don't grind my coffee. I don't grind my rosemary. No grinding. No
Right?
spas.
No. So you're just so plain, Michelle.
Oh,
So
plain
boring.
Jane.
Guess
Yep.
what? I am too. I also don't grind fresh herbs, but I have thought about it before. I know people who do. I'm like, maybe I should be, right?
Maybe,
But
maybe,
what's
maybe we will.
interesting for this meaning of grind, I have never heard anyone say grinded, right? I grinded some herbs. I grinded
Mm-mm.
the coffee grounds. No, this is
No.
not. So, like, sometimes for different meanings, yes, but not for this one, right? It's interesting how we Americans make some grammar mistakes with like
Mhm.
one meaning of a
Hmm.
verb, but not another. Tricky.
That is tricky. Yeah. So here, I would say you're more likely to say ground, right? In this
Yep.
in this kind of a situation.
Yeah, past tense is ground, and even Americans in general are more likely to say ground. I ground
Mm.
these herbs. And then it's interesting for a verb like this, and we'll talk about this more in a minute. Often, at least in the States, people sort of avoid using the simple past with the past
Mm.
tense verb, and instead they say, I used to grind herbs, but now I don't. Or, right? We'll find this
Ah.
workaround if we're not sure if it's ground or grinded.
That's interesting. That's true. So
Hmm.
even native speakers, we'll just kind of dance around it, try and find another way to say it if we're not sure.
Yes.
Definitely, I'm
We
guilty
have
of that.
sort of these cheats, right? Oh, I needed to grind some herbs, so I got out
Yeah.
my mortal and pestle. Make it
That's
easy on
really
ourselves.
funny. That's really funny.
But there are more meanings of grind,
Yep.
right? What is another definition for this?
Another one is to rub together gratingly. So, like, if I'm, putting well, okay, let's think about teeth, right? If you
Mhm.
grind your teeth, you're like squishing them together. And a lot of times people do that when they have anxiety in their sleep. So that can be definitely a bad habit for your teeth. So,
Yeah, I might
yeah.
say my son has a habit of grinding his teeth. And just like this means like putting them together and then rubbing them gratingly against each other.
Mhm.
And so this is a meaning where we might hear that mistake in the States, right? My son grinded his teeth when he was young, but not now. It is ungrammatical. It is a mistake, but this you might hear, like AI said for this listener, they might say, "Oh,
Mhm.
in America, Americans might use grinded as the past tense verb for
So
this definition."
interesting. Yeah. Or you could say, I could hear the gears grinding when the pool pump started. So you might say something like that as well.
Uh-huh. And then you might hear in the past tense, the gears grinded when they started. Like this, I feel like I have
Mm.
heard this mistake in the past. So it's interesting how, depending on the definition, at least speakers in the States might use ground or grinded, though ground is always the correct past tense verb.
Right, exactly. Interesting. And another definition could be to do hard, dull work. So, as a verb, right? He had to grind through hours of homework.
Yeah, and this is really interesting. I thought about this for a couple of minutes. I'm like, would someone say I grinded through hours of homework? Maybe. I certainly wouldn't hear I ground through hours of
No.
homework, even though that's the correct past tense.
Right.
This meaning, I think, especially, we use this workaround and we'll say, like, he had to grind through hours of homework, or I
Mm.
just needed to grind away until I finished the job. We really avoid using this actual verb in the past tense.
We don't even realize that we're avoiding it, right?
Right?
But it's
Exactly.
it's true. But
Interesting.
you could also use hard, dull work with grind as a noun, right? So you could say, this day has been a grind.
And this is even more common, I think. We use this
Yeah.
all the time, like, back at the
Back to the
grind on
grind, back to the
Monday, right?
grind.
Back
Yep.
to the grind, meaning like, "Oh, I had a weekend and now I'm, like, back at
Back to
work." Some things are repetitive at
right.
work, right? We call it the grind.
The grind. Yep. So let's talk about one more, Aubrey, right? Grounds. Tell us about this.
Yeah, because this listener asked about grind, grounds, and then past tense of grind. So
Mhm.
grounds also has a few meanings. First up, ground up coffee beans, like we were saying at the beginning of the show. I spilled coffee grounds all over the counter. This is why I don't use grounds. I use like little Keurig cups because I
Yeah.
just don't want to deal with the mess.
Yeah.
But I'm sure a lot of coffee enthusiasts are
Right.
horrified by that because they're
Yes.
using fresh grounds. It's so much more
Yes.
delicious and aromatic, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, aromatic. That's a good bonus word for
Ooh,
today. I
yes.
love that. Yeah. Now I'm just imagining all this fresh coffee. So that's good.
I'm like,
Um,
maybe I need to start doing fresh grounds. It's worth the mess to have more delicious coffee, I'm sure. But that's
yeah.
not the only meaning of grounds, right? It also means the gardens or land that surrounds a building. Often
True.
there's some kind of wall or fence around them when we call them grounds. You might say,
Mhm.
we went for a walk around the hospital grounds. This means like
Mhm.
you left your hospital room and there's some kind of garden or yard or grass, usually gated. That's the grounds of the hospital.
Mhm, mhm. Or you could use it, meaning the reason or knowledge a belief is based on. So grounds for doing something. So the employee was dismissed on the grounds of misconduct, right? So the reason why that happened, right?
Exactly. We hear this a lot on, like, legal shows, right?
Yep.
What is the grounds for that?
What
Meaning, like,
grounds? Yeah.
what's the reason? What was the
Right.
excuse, sort of?
Yeah. Very good.
All right, let's dive into a role play. You and I are roommates in this role play, Michelle.
Ooh,
So,
okay.
an
Sounds
alternate
good.
universe, a parallel universe
Yes,
where we were roommates.
exactly. Exactly. We'd be good roommates.
I think so.
All right, here we go. Ooh, we're almost out of coffee grounds. I'll pick up some from okay. My gosh, Aubrey, today is my day for mistakes. Here we go. I'm gonna start again. Okay. We're almost out of coffee grounds. I'll pick some up from the store today.
Oh, thanks. Where do you get them, by the way? Do they grind them for you?
Yeah, I just get them from the grocery store and there's a machine there I use to grind them.
Oh, well, thanks for doing that. I'll get them next time.
Sounds good. How's work going, by the way? I remember you said last week was a real grind.
This week is better. I've been taking breaks to walk on the grounds by the courthouse, and that's doing wonders for my mental health.
Awesome.
Fun. Okay, let's go through this. I was trying to like figure out how to
Use.
squeeze in
Yeah.
grounds for
Yeah.
like the legal. I'm a lawyer. On what grounds? It just wouldn't really be used in an everyday conversation like this among
Right.
roommates, right?
Right.
I feel like it's such a formal term. You'll hear it in a
Right.
courthouse, maybe at work, right? He was fired on the grounds of whatever the excuse was, whatever the reason was. But to squeeze it into a conversation between roommates would feel strange and
Forced. Yeah.
informal.
Exactly. So I said, we're almost out of coffee grounds. So the little dust particles of coffee that make that
Exactly, right? When
delicious.
we
Yeah.
grind up those coffee beans, that's what we end up we call them grounds
Grounds.
once they're
Yep.
ground up.
Yep.
And then I said, "Oh, where do you get those? Do they grind them for you?" So this is a just funny, like I've never bought coffee, which could happen, right? Or I've at least never maybe it's interesting. I'm thinking about this as roommates who maybe I have always used like Keurig pods.
Yeah.
And so you're saying, I'm going to go get the fresh ground coffee. And I'm like, wow, where do you do that? I don't even know.
Right, right, right. So you're trying to learn. And then I said, yeah, I get them from the grocery store. There's a machine there I use to grind them.
Yeah, so I'm asking, so this is that verb grind. And,
Mhm.
I'm asking if they grind them. This is the machine that grinds them. And then we dive straight into this other use of talking about a difficult job, like calling work a grind,
Yeah.
especially if you have a ton on your to-do list, you're kind of
Mhm.
drowning. That's when you might call it a grind. Because a lot of
Yeah.
people's jobs, if it's easier or stress-free, you wouldn't necessarily call it a grind, right?
Right. Right. True. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I said, how's work going? I said, I remember you said last week was a real grind. And I like how we added real there. That's very common. A real grind, right?
Yes, exactly. Oh, it is a real grind.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to say it, and that's
Could do a whole
very
episode
commonly
about that.
collocated that way. Yeah, I agree. And then
Mhm.
I said, "Oh, it's better because I've been taking breaks to walk on the grounds by the courthouse." So it's interesting because I would not call like my front yard grounds. It's
No.
different, right? It's usually
It's
like a
more
bigger building
bigger, more
fenced
formal.
in or gated in, but if there were like a palace, like Versailles
Right.
in France
Right.
has
Right.
grounds, right? These big, beautiful gardens with fountains and flowers. Those we would call the grounds of the palace.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but definitely not something we would describe a regular house.
No, no. That's a good point, Aubrey. So, and we wanted to teach you one more idiom. I love this. This is very common, which is stay grounded. Now, what does that mean, Aubrey?
Yeah, so this is a little preview for a follow up episode because this idiom, and there are a lot of other ways we say this in English, right? Even though it has the word ground here, grounded has a very different
Mhm.
meaning. So definitely hit follow for an episode on
Mm.
this idiom, stay grounded, and related phrases. Hit follow right here on All Ears English.
Awesome. Well, takeaway for today, Aubrey, I would say, yeah, guys, today's vocab, it's going to help you connect over coffee habits, your daily routine, so much. This is really, really useful. And of course, we're going to say, don't let learning vocab be a grind. And any other episode we want to direct our listeners to, Aubrey?
Yes, so that episode you and Lindsay did, All Ears English 2391, scroll up if you missed it, was how to connect over coffee habits in English.
It's fun.
This is another interesting thing to ask about if people use fresh grounds or
Mhm.
not, right? So
Yeah.
there's so many ways to connect over your coffee drinking.
Yes, love it. All right, Aubrey, thanks so much. This was really fun. This episode was not a grind with
No, I
you.
agree. Yes, I hope it wasn't a grind for you guys, and I'm
No.
excited for you to use this fun vocabulary to connect in English.
Awesome. All right, Aubrey, have a good one. See you soon.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.